Is Jane Sanders the most powerful woman not running in 2020? Washington U. Before Bernie Sanders took the stage to formally launch his 2020 presidential campaign this month, the candidate's most influential advisor took the mic. To Cheers, to be sure, identifying Jane Sanders as his political revolution has become her career. And her political, Bernie's. That involvement has drawn questions sometimes about her political judgment, family opportunism, and flawed ethics from political foes, good government advocates and longtime Sanders watchers in Vermont and in the progressive movement. Most recently, her dual roles at the Institute and in her husband's campaign carried echoes of the Clinton Foundation, which Bernie Sanders criticized in 2016 as a possible ethics conflict and backdoor for foreign donors seeking to influence his then-rival Hillary Clinton. Bernie. Jane Sanders acted this past week to remove the think tank as a possible campaign ethics target, telling the Associated Press that the Institute's operations and fundraising would be suspended for the balance of her husband's 2020 presidential campaign. Since its creation, Sanders may prove an important surrogate for her husband, particularly in a race crowded with female candidates and potentially hinging on how women vote. She's become an essential liaison to the progressive activists at the heart of the Sanders base, using the Institute to host meetings of policymakers and activists. An affable, steeped in years of involvement in progressive causes, Sanders comfortably slipped into the role as the event's MC. Before a crowd of similarly, in videos posted on the Institute's website, she has led numerous policy conversations with experts in a Brooklyn accent fainter than her husband's. Jane Sanders is not compensated for her role at the Institute. Her son, Dick, like her husband, Jane Sanders has. Jane Sanders expressed frustration about concerns that she and some of her children have at times benefited from their activities affiliated with Sanders' expanding political apparatus. How? Politics has long been a family project for the couple. Jane Sanders first worked with her future husband as director of the mayor's youth office in Burlington. They were both they wed in 1988, a second marriage for both 2 years before Sanders won his first election to Congress. Jane Sanders went in the early 2000s, she took on a new role along with her daughter, Karina. Two women set up, in 2004, the year before Bernie Sanders launched his winning Senate campaign, his wife was named president of Burlington College, a local small liberal arts college. In 2000, she promised at the time the deal would be paid for with increases in enrollment and about $2.7 million in donations. But her plans never weave. But she said she was confident that the decision to put the think tank on hiatus was best. The move, she said, will allow her to expand her campaign work freely for the Sanders campaign, including more solo stops on her husband's behalf. Ring reported from Montpelier, Vermont, and Peoples from New York.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.